The topic is game design with our hosts, Top Lopo, Psych, and special guest, Grr.
Woo!
Yay!
Alright,
That's an
thank
awesome
you.
intro. Thank you.
Yay!
Yes.
Thanks, and
Yes.
thanks everyone for coming to Endgame
The topic
tonight.
is game
We do,
design
as our guest,
with
we
our
have
hosts, Top
Grr,
Lopo,
or
Psych, and
however
special
you say that
guest,
name in Norse. I'm not
Grr.
gonna attempt.
Grr's fine.
Okay, sure, great. And you are a game designer. You're a member of the VRChat community, but professionally, you are a game designer. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. Nice to meet you all. I've been working as a game designer for 6-7 years at this point. And throughout my time, I basically spend most of my time designing games based off of, common held practices within the industry, new ideas I want to try. Basically, my job is to document and plan out the way a game is going to be made in order to bring out the maximum amount of fun for the player. And I can do that through a variety of ways, through different kinds of balancing with spreadsheets. I can do it through stuff I've played before, like say I want to do stealth, I could do like Assassin's Creed, I could do it, kind of like Thief or what have you. And through a variety of different means, I can mix and match a bunch of different things together to make the most fun game I could possibly make for someone.
So like that's game design, but it sounds like data analysis in a lot of ways.
The two are one and the same. Game analysis, game design is game analysis in a lot of ways. In fact, there's a lot of different ways we do analyze games, but we'll definitely get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, tell us about
Michael,
like the. Oh,
did you have something to say real fast? Or
Do you sell applications or something?
Would you mind standing to the center here?
Or I think your mic is set to the wrong mic. Actually, it's pretty hard to hear you.
Yeah. We just hear a low hum.
Yeah, I think you got to change your mic. Yeah.
So if you.
Well, here, why don't you come up a little
yourself...
closer and I can hear you. And that's how you get rid of them.
So I'm gonna turn.
Yes.
No, sorry, Michael. Sorry.
Let's see.
But yeah, it's
Do
pretty.
do you know
fix that?
anything?
We can't really hear what you're saying. The stream definitely
can't really
can't.
hear.
So,
Yeah, it's just a lot
maybe try to
buzz.
fix your mic and just come back to us
Yeah.
later.
Some epic feedback.
Oh.
Oh.
Can
yeah.
you tell us about how
somebody
you got
leaving the room.
started with this and like what your path has been?
Certainly. My path has been rocky to say the least. I essentially came fresh out of high school with the idea in my head of I want to be a game designer. Now, this is of course something I've wanted to be since I was like 8 years old. So, I've been picking up game strategy guides. I've been looking, while Google still wasn't really around, so I didn't really have much means to search for different articles on game design or things like that. So I kind of just grabbed everything I could while I was still in school. And the moment I left high school, I picked up a game engine, Unity, which is what VRChat is built in.
Yeah.
And I just started doing work for marketing agencies, just trying to both trying to become a better developer and to, make ends meet.
Can I ask what kind of work marketing agencies ask for?
Well, I'll tell you.
If it's not too sensitive.
It's sensitive, but let's do it.
Oh, okay.
Essentially what it is,
yes.
is they have like these they want you to do like weird interactive things at trade shows and things like that. Usually very short turnaround. You get maybe 2 or 3 weeks to make these things.
Oh.
So not a lot of time, and really taught me how to prototype fast and get stuff done that was fast.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout that time, I managed to start finally getting bigger work that led me to actually start doing design work instead of development work, which, I'm a bit stingy on that, where design and development are two very different things. Development is all about the building of the game, while design is all about the planning of the game and structuring it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Essentially, a designer can give you basically the whole document of how a game is supposed to be made, hand it to a game developer, and they'll make it. They'll be able to make the whole thing from beginning to end.
I see.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the things that make something a game? Like, for example, some people call VRChat a game, but then I feel like it's different than a game. I don't actually feel like VRChat's a game, but but some people think it's a social experience. I mean, I guess how many people here think that? Yeah, how many people here would categorize?
It's an application.
Yes.
I
Okay. So
would say
emojis.
that
I want to get. Hold on. I'm going to get emoji vote real fast.
Yes.
And I just want. How many people here would say that
Okay.
the thumbs up if VRChat is a game, and thumbs down if you would categorize it as something else? Or I mean, if thumbs up if it's both or whatever. But
Okay,
I'm gonna
so
put
we
mine
got
right in the
game,
middle.
Game.
Middle.
We've got
Okay.
like one game vote.
Wait. So okay. I see. Catastracide. God damn. What?
Do you have a comment?
Catas.
I think it's catastrophe.
Yeah.
Catastrophe. Sorry.
Catastrophe.
I really. It's like a.
Come towards
yeah,
the center so I can hear you better.
Yeah. It's catastrophe. Just call me Kata. I mean, it's mine
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. That's. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have a
I mean,
comment?
it's about it being a game. I mean, of course, it's a game. I mean, but at the
Why is
same
that an of
time,
course?
well,
Like what makes it a game?
Would you mind standing in the center here? So
oh
everybody can hear you.
jeez, oh jeez.
Yeah, you're all good.
And
You're
I'm
all
blocking
good.
camera
okay.
guy, am I? Like,
No, you're
It's
on
all good.
camera.
I mean, because it's a game because isn't there games within this game, and you could make into whatever you want, really. I mean,
Mhm.
you know,
Does that-
in terms
So it is
There
a
are
of
games within,
possibility of
like-
being a game.
yeah,
Well, it holds games.
it does.
That's
yeah.
true.
I mean,
There are
It's
games
Well,
that
Steam
use
holds
users.
games, but would you consider Steam
Yeah.
a game?
That. Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
So Facebook and Steam are both. Yeah. Would you consider those games?
Platforms.
So,
Yeah,
It might be
platform.
interesting to think of those as games.
What is
though.
VRChat a platform? I mean,
That's true.
didn't it
And
turn
also
into whatever
Facebook.
the users wanted it to be?
mhm. So
True.
let me ask you something. Let me ask you all something really quickly. Do you all consider World of Warcraft to be a game? Give me
yes.
thumbs up if you
Yes.
think World of Warcraft is a game.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Actually, give some of it.
Yeah, I'm seeing a pretty much consensus that everybody thinks World of Warcraft is a game.
Okay.
How do you win World of Warcraft?
Oh, so games have to be winnable? Is that the definition?
No, I'm not saying
No,
that.
but
I'm
it's an
saying
interesting question.
You get all the gear.
right.
No.
So the
There's
thing is,
no
the way I'm trying to get
definitions.
at this, VRChat is equal to Second Life, and Second Life is equal to World of Warcraft in the same ways. For example,
Oh.
World of Warcraft is not a game; it is a series of games.
Oh.
So
games.
you can do a lot of accomplishable things in World of Warcraft. You can hit max level in fishing. You can hit high tier rating bosses. You can be the champ of PvP.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
you
Oh my
can't
God.
win at World of Warcraft because it's not a game to be won.
Okay.
Very much the same about VRChat. VRChat
So,
in itself is not a game.
so
It is
something
a
that can
game of
be
games. It's a
won
series of games, or
is
a
not a
series of
game?
things you can do.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
And through those, you're able to experience a whole wide array of different things. So I think it's a bit limiting to call it a game, but at the same time, you can't not call it a game.
Again,
So that's why I'm putting
what
it,
is
you know,
it?
right in the middle, because it is both a game and not a
It
game at the
defines-
exact same
it
time.
defines boundaries.
It's the universe.
Right. It's the
Yeah, it's
universe.
universe.
Oh, we're getting some heavy
That's
people.
great. Okay, thank you, Catastrophe,
Yeah,
for
I
your
think-
for
are
your
you
comments.
guys'
I
frame
appreciate
rates-
it.
Have your guys' frame rates?
They
crashed up
are.
soon?
They
I would
yeah, our
like
frame rates
to-
tanked.
To say
you
one
guys-
more
so-
thing.
Everyone,
Can-
people
yeah, everyone-
use less?
Yeah, please
man, now
change
what's
to
going
as simple
on?
avatars as you
Oh
have
my
as you can.
crap.
But see, like, isn't this what the new
was
system is
like,
supposed to
what?
help with?
Yes.
No,
Well, I have
not
mine
really.
turned completely off. You could set yours to maximum if you want. Anyway, so yeah, that's the answer about kind of what VRChat is. There are games in it. For example, our friend Keebs, or I guess he's called Atari now, he built a room that is a puzzle room,
Oh.
and it's a game. But at the same time, you do win the game. So in essence, that is a game, and it is holding that as a game. But it's a little. It would be very limiting to call this in itself a game.
I see what you mean. It would
yeah,
be limiting
let's
to define it as such.
let's continue a little bit because
Yeah.
I'd like to
Sure.
question Gur a little bit more about kind of your like. So you developed you were doing game development first, and then you moved on to game design.
Yep.
So what was your goal? What kind of games did you want to design?
Great question. And that actually leads me into the next part of my path to game design. Eventually, I was able to gather work and begin work at a place called Noitum. For those of you who don't know, Noitum is the company that works on Perception Neuron, a group motion capture suits. They are fantastic.
Yes.
I personally love them. Cannot recommend them enough if you are doing motion capture work or things like that. I got to work on a special team called Project Alice, which was room scale VR experiences. Now everybody go, ooh, because no one's ever heard of a room scale experience yet. This was
What
before
year
I
was
saw
this?
it SVVR. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
What year
This
was
was
this?
years
So we
ago.
Can... Yeah, but
This was,
what
I would
year?
say, 2015.
3 years
2015
ago,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, 3
So
years ago.
So room scale wasn't really out yet. So we had like Optitrax cameras along the ceiling, and it was coming into the wall, and we had like little dots all over us to help track us, and all sorts of fun things. So those are really, I like to focus on emerging technologies. I'm going to really drill down into my title for a second. I am a emerging technology systems designer. So that means I like to focus on game mechanics, interactions, the way in which you can interact with the game world itself. And I like to try that with stuff that is just coming out of the industry now. So motion capture, VR, certain stuff that, I like, but I don't really feel like I can talk about at the moment.
Hey, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but man, speaking of interacting with the game environment, the frame rate is really distracting, and I was thinking, do you remember how I opened up the wrong room? Like, maybe this is just too old of an instance, and maybe it's not optimized
the room
enough.
feels fine. If I look this way, I'm getting,
I don't know.
13, 14.
Oh, you're right. If I turn around, it isn't as bad. Okay, thumbs up if your frame rate is intolerable right now.
I got all
Might
that
just be me.
besides my friends.
I mean, I'm doing okay
That's the way to
personally,
do it.
but
Okay,
I mean,
all right. I
25
apologize.
frames
Okay.
kind of suck. But...
it's all good. It's all good. If you want, feel free to degrade the avatars.
And then, okay, all right.
But yeah, let's just quickly finish up this part of the thing. Is that after Noitum, I had a game strategy company that I owned for quite some time called the Skywatchers. Me and a group of individuals, kind of acted as a key turn game design company. So people would come to us saying, hey, I want to make this kind of game. And then my team and I would scrounge together like all the different things we got, made a big package of different game elements. And basically, if you think of it like a recipe, we're handing them basically all the recipe that is needed in order to make this thing. And all they have to do is put the ingredients together, and boom, they have a game. And I had that for quite some time. And then afterward, I dissolved the Skywatchers because, we were kind of starting to get stuck in a bit of a rut. And then I joined Black Box Realities, which is a VR studio based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And that's actually where I got to meet Psych and all sorts of wonderful people. Yay, Nashville. And now I'm going to be moving on to all sorts of fun other stuff too. I think that about covers it.
So, okay.
Endgame, what's up?
I saw you had a...
Oh.
Yeah, so
well,
I've actually been working with a company. I don't know if I'm allowed to give their name, but you would probably know them, Gur. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
I've actually been using my knowledge of the people player base here. I've been helping them find users for specific tasks. Like I know at one point this company was looking for a shader developer, only to find out that the shader developer tells them, "What are you doing? You can do it this way much easier without a custom shader. Good job." And it's one of those things of working with a company. Sometimes, in the field, being able to play test these games and see what works is much better than having the knowledge. And then even being able to get a job out of playing games just because of the knowledge you learn, that's even better.
Right. Game playing is a vital part of going into game design. I know, shocker. But I should make the point that game design is not playing games. It's not just playing games. In fact, that's probably one of the biggest myths of game design is that personally, when I'm like in the middle of doing a bunch of work, I don't have time to play games. I really don't, which is sad because I love them a lot. But I honestly don't have a lot of time to play games sometimes.
So Catapult, I know that you also had come to the center to line up and ask a question. So, yeah, what was your question? Do you want to come?
Well, it was more a comment.
Yeah, or comment. Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, come on in.
Yeah, feel free to add comments or anything. Or
Well, when we're talking about is VRChat a game, to me, it's more like a social experience with games in it. Like you can go play bowling or whatever, capture the flag, so on and so forth. To me, it's more like an experience, and it's a social one, so you can talk to people and whatnot, but you can also go off and look at people's avatars, the stuff they create, and the worlds that they create, and all that. So, to me, that part is more of an experience.
Is it like an amusement park?
It can be, but it's just a general experience that has social.
It sounds like a positive experience, and it's also. It's more like real life, so it doesn't feel like just playing a game. Even separate from World of Warcraft, which is a really interesting question, is World of Warcraft a game? Like even separate from World of Warcraft, it's very interesting to kind of see the similarities and differences between VRChat and how you feel like it's just socialization. It's a core part of human nature, as opposed to a game that creates these, artificial goals and restraints and things like that. This is free and allows people to socialize.
Speaking about the structure of games, though, like games usually do require some constraints, right? They have like that's what differentiates them from the real world. So, like speaking of game design and how game design isn't the same thing as game playing. You mentioned to us while we were talking some different ways of looking at games. Like how does a game designer look at these things differently from someone who plays games?
Great question and great lead off. When viewing games as a game designer, the first thing you have to kind of do is you have to first play the game on its own and fully enjoy it. And then you go back through a second time, and this time you can look at it through what we call a few different lenses. The term of lenses was actually popularized by a man named Jesse Schell, who is one of the big wigs, the big awesome guys in the game industry at the moment. He has worked, all over the place and is a fantastic professor out of Carnegie Mellon. He says that game design is a world of lenses, and we can choose which lens we want to view a game through. For me personally, I group different analyses or ways of to analyze games into a few different groups. The different kinds of game analysis we're going to call game analysis frameworks are the MDA framework, for example, which stands for Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics. We have the FDD framework, which is the Formal, Dramatic, Dynamic, and I'll go over what these all are. And we have the Elemental Tetrad, which was designed by Jesse Schell. And we have the Layered Tetrad, which is an in-depth look upon the Elemental Tetrad. And then finally, we have, custom ones that game designers will make. Like I, of course, have my own, and then I'm sure other designers have their own frameworks and whatnot. The most simple kind that you would find out in the field of actual game designers using is the MDA framework. That's because it's the most general way of being able to group together the pieces of a game.
What is even going on here?
Hey, who asked that?
Oh. It's all good.
So, well, if you have a
Not me,
question,
yeah.
a clarification question maybe about what it is,
Sure.
feel free to ask it.
Those people have all been here before, though, so I don't know. I don't understand.
Interesting.
Okay,
All
so
right.
continue. So mechanics and dynamics and
Yes.
aesthetics are the
Yes.
basic lens to look at games through.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say they are basic. They're the most general one that you'll find out in the field because it's the one everybody's taught when they first join. Mechanics can be defined as all of the hard-coded elements within a game. You can define those as things like if you push left, you'll get to go left. If it's all about the code within the game and the underlying.
Can you give us a VRChat example?
Oh, certainly. In the mechanics of VRChat, for example, if you were to press up on your touchpad, you go forward. If you press back, you go back. Things as simple like that. If you press the menu, you get the menu button. You get interactions that you get to do. And mechanics can also, be described as, the different things you can do within the game, such as leveling and what have you. These are all things that are defined before, you start up the game. Things that are going to be there no matter what. The next piece you get is the dynamics. So dynamics is all dependent upon the play. When the player hits start, let's say you're playing Pac-Man, and you press the start button. That's when immediately you enter into dynamics or the rules. As a player, you can move left, right, up, and down, but you can only move so far, or else you hit a barrier, which means a rule is you can't go past the barriers. Another thing that's in the dynamics is
it's harder. It's interesting because it's harder in VRChat. Like, what are those barriers and rules? Like Pac-Man.
What are the dynamics?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like it's much more complex with something like VRChat, which is maybe why partly it feels like, is it a game? Is it real life? That kind of like struggle. Yeah, so interesting.
Well, there's still certainly a lot of dynamics within here as well. For example, you can define, like I can, sit down in this chair, and that adds a whole new layer of things I can do and what have you.
Isn't
Dynamics is
like I press on the chair. I press on the chair and I sit down.
Yes, but now you can enter into a whole other connotation of social elements, which would be dynamics.
Okay.
However, that's handled in a much different framework, what you're describing, although that is a very good point. So dynamics is all about the play experience from the player. Finally, you have aesthetics. Aesthetics is the emotional output of the game. What are you trying to make the player feel, and how are you doing that? If you're looking at it from a game designer point of view, let's return back to Pac-Man. What is the emotional output of Pac-Man? What are you trying to make the player feel? You're going off collecting dots, you're trying to run away from ghosts. You get your power pellet and you're able to start eating them now. And you're in a rush to eat all the dots before you get eaten. Okay. So you're going to get a lot of anxiety, some stress, and greatness.
I have a question about this. This is interesting. And I know this is kind of veering off topic a little bit, but I think it's really interesting with the social stuff of is VRChat. I think Zarni, you mentioned is Facebook. Is Facebook a game, or is it a platform? Do you have any other thoughts on that too? Because I want to just ask about that.
Certainly.
About what is it? The differences.
So good point there.
I was kind of wondering, just in back to our World of Warcraft example. If World of Warcraft, the one through line that World of Warcraft has that kind of, if it's a game, it's the fundamental mechanic of the game is that you have a character, and the character can express itself in different ways as it grows and gain levels. But now we can do that in VRChat too, right? We can gain levels. We're gaining social levels. So does that make it a game?
Make yourself gain levels.
So it has game elements within it. However, that's gamification, which is actually a whole other conversation entirely. Gamification has game-like elements, but they are not traditionally used within. Yeah.
So, like the Facebook example, then, like, and then how many posts a like gets, or sorry, how many likes a post gets? Is that like a gamified aspect? It's like your score.
Yep, that is exactly right. Facebook uses gamification as one of its core features, being able to like, share, comment, all things.
And that's a question, I guess, is like, are we engaged in a game with Facebook? The people who are checking their phones constantly looking to see if they have a notification, are they any different than someone sitting in a slot machine, sitting in front of a slot machine, feeding pennies into it, waiting for the gambling thing to come out? It's like, are we engaged in a game? And it like, does it actually feel like we're,
How is it different from any other reward system?
So I'm going to stop you both for a moment because you're both raising excellent points. What I would like to bring up, I'm going to put on my philosopher hat for a moment. No, you're all good. I'm going to put on my philosopher hat for a moment with two simple things. Is that the surface level of this is that no, it's not a game, because if you go to work, let's say you go work at a big corporation and they start scoring you based off of performance and things like that, and you get points based off of, if you do somebody a favor, they can award you some points and things like that you can redeem
like
later.
Money? You get promotions?
Yeah.
Or social credit.
Not promotions,
China has this
maybe.
system developed for billions of people.
Like
this is
sesame
the
credit.
social credit score in China, where you have those decisions, like who you associate with, and changes your overall score. What you read, what you buy, all those kinds of things. That's it sounds like the ultimate example of that.
Yeah, game elements like that are shortcuts to dopamine hits. So that's the reason why they use them. They're not using them in order to create a game, because they certainly aren't games. They are using game elements in order to give you dopamine hits. So that way, you're encouraged to, it's pretty Skinner box. It's positive reinforcement. It rewards you in order to increase the likelihood that you're going to perform that action again, and then continue that feedback loop.
So to kind of bring it around back to your work.
Yes.
So I wanted to I wanted to ask you again about your kind of your work on this and your like what you do. Do you have what's your preferred method of providing those dopamine hits, or like what is exciting about this to you? I don't know. Talk about your work.
Okay. Well, the reason why I really love the work I do in VR and emerging technologies is all about because the fact that I like to pave the road. I want to think of myself as paving the road for future designers. Whereas, I at my work at Noitum, for example, I got to work with hand controllers, like some of the first ones out. And I was like, holy crap, these are awesome. And then I was challenged, okay, tell us what we can do with them. That question was posed to me. And so from that point on, I continued to work with hand controllers until eventually I was able to get enough research done to be like, here you go, here's everything you can do with hand controllers, and here's the best way to go about incorporating them into games. And they go, thank you. Perfect.
Sounds like you did a scientific research.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of my work as well, is if you're going to go into emerging technologies, you're going to do a lot of research, because that's just inherent with the fact that nobody knows what you're doing.
So I guess also, I know that we're a good bit into the episode, and we also had mentioned this is like a Q&A as well with you as a game designer. And obviously you're an amazing game designer, Emily. I'm excited to have you on the show and everything. But yeah, I feel like, does anyone have any questions or anything like that? If you want to come forward about
a lot of us here are content creators. So yeah, come to the center if you're interested in a question. Do you have one, Michael?
Your mic is totally fixed. It is.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I always want. Do you sell any games or something?
I'm sorry?
Do you sell any games or something?
Yeah, what are your games? Do you have them for sale?
There are some games that I have had the opportunity to work on. earlier in my career, I have worked at EA Sports, which was completely off the reservation of what I usually do now. But like I worked in 2K for a little while on the NBA series and things like that. Like NBA 2K13, I did some QA work on, and so on and so forth. Nowadays, unfortunately, you're probably not going to find a lot of work out in the open, and that's because, unfortunately, because I deal with emerging technologies, I kind of have to take a step out of the limelight and into the shadows. Because if I work on something with emerging technologies, yes, if I work on anything with emerging technologies, the problem is that it doesn't have a lot of adoption. So there's not a lot of people who want to play it because they just don't have it. So it's not exactly profitable to do.
So you're basically a trendsetter or something, right?
I am the trend.
Ooh, all right.
I like it.
Snap.
Okay.
Thanks, Psycho.
Thanks.
Ross.
Hey, Gross.
Hello.
Hello. Gert, so in your honest opinion, where do you see VR developing in the next 3 to 5 years?
3 to 5 years. That's a big question I hear, and I always hear different time ranges too. So that's interesting. I've even heard it as so far as, what do you think is going to happen in VR next month? And I've heard like, what's going to happen to VR in 50 years?
Well, tell us everything.
But for 3 to 5 months, I can tell you that wireless is pretty much going to become the next big thing to hit. Because they just released the new Vive wireless pieces that they have. Oh, I'm so excited. And the Quest and all sorts of things. The new thing that's going to hit in the 3 to 5 months is going to be wireless. We're going to get really into wireless. We're going to figure out everything we can do with wireless, and then we're going to go on to the next thing, whatever weird technology jump we're going to make then.
I haven't played it, or I haven't played with any of the wireless versions, but like, do they really have isn't the bandwidth of the rendering a problem?
Yeah, I tried the Quest at OC5, and it was unbelievable. It felt like I was in a rift the whole time.
I'm so jealous.
Dead and buried, which was like basically from this stage to that back wall or whatever was, or not the most farthest back wall, but in our immediate kind of vicinity, like this rectangle, whatever, like that size, and you could run around and basically hide behind boxes and shoot people in Dead and Buried, and like it was 3v3, and it felt like you were in a paintball arena.
That does
it was
sound fun.
unbelievable, completely freeing, and this opens up a whole new area of exploration for VR.
Well, I mean, then VRChat. Well, okay, here's the big problem. Here's the big problem.
If they don't want to support the Quest, I think.
Well, here's the problem: is that I'm sure they're trying to port it. It's just they got to port it to a whole other operating system that doesn't take anything close to what desktops can take.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to deal with that.
So much of the computing here happens on happens on a CPU. Like, you need a decent processor and a decent graphics card.
Well, funny enough, the processor isn't as important. The graphics card is all that really matters.
For VRChat,
you can actually work with an i5.
Yeah, not for
CPU.
For the Quest, they'd have to dummy down. They'd have to dummy down VRChat so bad that it wouldn't be VRChat anymore.
I would have to agree with him on that. That's Altspace was on the Oculus Go, and I jumped in and I'm like, yeah, this is cool, but it's not VRChat.
I know, right? Okay.
All right, Zarnawhoop.
Zarnawhoop.
I was wondering if at some point in the future you're planning on making VRChat worlds and then using your knowledge to make cool stuff.
So, funny thing about that. Absolutely. The answer is absolutely. I've always wanted to make VRChat worlds. Like, you don't understand how jealous I am of people who have VRChat worlds. The problem is time. I just don't ever have time for anything. So I look around and I'm going, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. Can I do that? Can I do that, please? And then I turn around and I go, oh, wait, I have to do this. I have a due date in like 3 weeks.
Have you considered maybe making cool prefabs with mechanics that are modular? You can just distribute to people. That should be less time consuming, maybe.
I mean, Zarni, do you think that's happening? I mean, you're a big world creator yourself. Like, do you think that that's the future of VRChat?
There's already like a
there's a whole
prefab
Discord server
Discord.
for it.
That's
Oh,
that's
yeah?
already going on. People are
I mean, I
making
wouldn't
prefabs
mind.
I didn't know about
for
that.
avatars and worlds
I
and
didn't either.
distributing them.
Wow.
See, I
yeah,
wouldn't
it's-
mind becoming like a source from people that they could ask me questions because I'm also a Unity developer, and I've been a Unity developer for the same time I've been a game designer. So I'm really open to helping people with their worlds and helping them through code problems or Unity's many interesting features. But for the most part, if I do get time to make a world, I will absolutely make a world because I
You should
think
talk
it's
with
like the coolest thing ever.
about that, about helping people out, because she knows of the Discord that I.
Oh yeah, yeah, I can hook you up.
Prefab Discord.
Sure.
Yeah, this prefab sounds
All right,
awesome.
thanks, Arnie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, PK.
All right, PK.
Hey there. I was just a bit curious. How often and do you enjoy working, like developing games for technology that doesn't exist yet? Like, I can imagine it's not as immediately rewarding. Like, I know you're kind of trying to work on emerging technologies, but do you actually work on like whole operating systems and technology that you know isn't going to be out in a few years? And is it just a lot harder?
I have to be careful about what I say. I have a few NDAs. The short answer to your question is I love it. It's not an immediate reward, and it's not what I'm going to see for a while. But it's kind of like being able to see behind the curtain, like in the Wizard of Oz, like being able to look behind the curtain and see what's there.
Sure.
That is really fantastic for me, of being able to see, and also being able to be a voice of somebody that can go, what's that thing? Can I do game stuff with that? And they're like, well, we didn't expect it to do game stuff, but sure, I guess if you want. And I'm like, I'm gonna do game stuff with that. Yeah, give it.
But have you made stuff on
yeah.
really cool tech that you could tell would have been great, but it didn't come out or it didn't have any popularity? So, like, have you worked on stuff like that end up going nowhere?
That is NDA because I can't talk about that quite yet. But yes, to answer your question, absolutely. One of the things I thought was complete. I was actually going to start developing for it way back, but then I realized that there was just no market for it. We're two different products. They were on two different products. The first was thanks. Was the PS Vita. The Vita was fantastic. It had better stuff inside than the DS. It looked fantastic. It had way better resolution, and it could play way better games. And it also had Kingdom Hearts, which is my favorite game. Hell yeah.
Kingdom
Hell
Hearts.
yeah. Kingdom Hearts. Wait, really? Dang, why have we never talked about that? We got to talk more. So I wanted to develop on that, but it just did not have enough games or adoption rate, so I just couldn't make it for it. And then the other one was the Wii U. The Wii U I thought as a fantastic design challenge, because to me that's like awesome unbalanced gameplay, where somebody has a tablet and other people have controllers, and you're able to talk between each other. It's asymmetrical gameplay, which is fantastic, and I love it. But that also didn't have a great adoption rate. So you kind of have to follow where the money is, because as much as I like to be an artiste about things, I also have to make a living.
Okay, but so you do a bit of both.
Do a bit of both of what?
So you work on some risky stuff, but you also work on projects where it's more assured that. Well, I guess even the experiments, I guess, could pay pretty well too sometimes.
The reason I take on the risky things, like emerging technologies itself, is risky because you don't know where it's going to hit and where it's not. So I pretty much try to take on as much risk as humanly possible in that world because. And I'm going to be a bit selfish for a moment. It's to make me a better designer. Because if I'm faced with a bunch of stuff I've never faced before and being told, okay, make a game out of it. or find design about it, or find ways that we can turn it into a game, that stretches my mind, and that makes me a better designer because it lets me reach into a deeper well of what I can do. So it becomes a much more of a question of that. Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks,
PK.
PK.
Thanks.
Yep.
One more
Lyco.
question. For people who want to work in the game industry, which is better to start on? Should people start working in a popular company or an indie company?
The question is neither. The answer to that is neither. The best way to get started in the game industry is, personally, there are a few routes you can go. I would, if you don't want to go to school, which the answer I'm about to give you all is the non-school option. There are fantastic schools out there. A great friend of mine, Ian Schreiber, is the professor of game design at Rochester Institute of Technology up in New York. I highly recommend that if you can get in, because it's fantastic. Carnegie Mellon, University of Southern California. There's a lot of great game design schools out there. For the route of not going into a school, you won't be able to get into any of those. So it's better to set your expectations low. Just keep going.
where does that leave you then? If you can't go to any of these places, where do you start?
Yeah.
Well, you start with marketing agencies. I know it sounds boring and terrible, but in game design, you can go down 3 routes. You can go down the artist route, where you become a modeler or a texture artist or a shader artist, and you enter into the industry that way. Or you go the programming route, which I took, which, you learn the engine, you learn code, you learn things like that. So you become very useful for the industry. Or you go right down the center and go full on design, which has worked for some people, but more often than not doesn't work. Usually it works if you go with one of those 2 others.
You say that the marketing option is the really boring option, but the way you described it earlier was so vague and mysterious that it actually sounds very exciting.
Okay, so let me say it like this. Quick story time. One of the projects I had to do was for an undisclosed marketing agency that wanted me to make something for the Final Four, because they were doing a trade show event for AT&T. Fun.
I don't know what that means.
They wanted to make a Pop-A-Shot basketball game where you had a phone, and what you would do is you would actually shoot basketballs with your finger up, and then on the TV across from you, it would take those basketballs and try to shoot them into the hoop.
But this is virtual,
games like that.
This is a digital virtual game?
No, it's a phone game. They were trying to sell the new LG phones. So I got a bunch of those phones, and you had to swipe up in order to send basketballs up.
Basically, tech
so it had that layer of multiplayer and things like that. And I was given about 3 weeks to do it.
Oh,
what?
That's kind of cool. I don't know, the multiple screen thing with the multiple devices. I don't know.
It's cool, but it's also a lot of work because you have 3 weeks to do it.
Yeah,
and
that
at the
doesn't sound
time,
fun.
I was a bit junior. I was pretty junior at it, so I was very green. So I ended up spending 100 hours a week working on it each week.
Oof.
It was garbage town.
Why do you think you said neither? I mean, what is your implications of the biggest 2 things I've asked? Working in either a AAA company or an indie company to properly learn the environment of the game industry. Why did you say neither?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I believe I misheard. I thought, how should I start? But if you're trying to learn, best practices. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just trying to say because I'm actually planning to go work in the game industry one day. I'm gonna go to college to learn game development. So I'm actually gonna be
I think he was trying to say that it's hard to get into both of those things, right? It's hard to get into an indie game studio, and it's hard to get into AAA.
But I'm just asking, what are the implications for both of them? Trying to improve upon the question of the for what I'm trying to ask.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I think I see what you're saying now. So personally, I worked in a AAA environment, and it all depends on what role you get. For example, I worked QA a lot. You don't get taught much. You're taught the stuff you're able to be taught that you need to be taught for your job, and that's about it. And you don't learn much past it. And you're also not really looked at much. Indie studios, I would say, have a much better chance of you learning the things you want to learn. At a AAA studio, they have you learn the specific thing they need you to learn to do your job, because you're really more of a cog in the machine. But in an indie studio, I would highly recommend anybody join an indie studio first. It's not going to be glamorous. Your first title is probably going to fail. I'm just setting expectations. But
realism.
yeah, I'm just setting expectations now. But it's great learning experience, because you get to learn a bunch about the engine in a short amount of time, because you're doing multiple hats. You're learning all these different things about the engine. For anybody, I would always recommend an indie studio first if you're going to do anything. Because AAA, if you jump right into AAA, you're going to do yourself a disservice. Because even if you go in as a game designer, they're going to teach you their way of game design, which is sometimes stifling.
So that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's really good advice, and yeah, that was a really good question, Lyko.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
I know that we're kind of like headed towards the end of the episode, and so one thing I wanted to ask you about VRChat and the gamification element, and I know that we don't even necessarily have to answer whether VRChat is a game tonight, and I'm very curious because this is my first time in VRChat. Actually, I've been in VRChat for 4 years. This is my first time in VRChat seeing the new trust and safety system that they've implemented, and I'm curious, like, what game mechanics is that related to, and like, what's your kind of thoughts on that? I guess just in general, like
good question.
Is that gamification? Like, what is it?
What do you mean? Oh, this part, like these things?
Yeah, just the whole system of different colors and.
So this is a gamification system. You can tell because it's not actually trying to achieve a goal. It is a game. If you are interacting with something fun that does not have a goal to it, it is a toy. Yeah, it's actually a good way of thinking about it.
But
this more than anything is more of a toy than anything. What?
But isn't there a goal? Is there not?
Is there a goal?
I mean,
there may be a goal outside of it.
Yeah, build trust. It's like, yeah, building trust is a goal. I think that definitely is a goal.
That's a meta goal. It's certainly a meta goal.
True.
Certainly, but I mean, once you hit the highest standard, in that case, there is some gamification in there. But for the most part, like the coloration of being able to tell. It's classic MMO structure a bit, except for the orange. Orange usually comes last, which threw me off a little bit. But this is like standard progression of colors within an MMO environment, trying to rank people based off of, how trustworthy they are, which personally I don't fully agree with. And I'll tell you why. It's primarily due to the fact that when you take a look at everybody here, I see the people with purple names, and I think, oh, these are the people I need to go talk to. They're the people that I want to talk to the most, because they're the most popular ones. They're the best ones. But I look at, let's say, a green name, like Grost. I go Grost, and I go, oh, you're just a user. You're just a user. How dare you just be? Oh, okay.
I don't actually feel that way. Yeah.
You don't. I'm of course exaggerating the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point though. I did some research on this after the beta came out and everything, and I might link some articles in the Discord, because there was an article about how our brains just by default want to view people in a hierarchy. We're not as comfortable seeing people, in complete equanimity to each other. We default to finding ways to construct social status and to construct social hierarchy. So we're already defaulted into wanting that information to be there. And then there's a couple other things, like the way we calculate social status is very similar to the way we actually do math, which I think there's like neurologically the process is very similar, and so like that in combination with the different colors and everything, like that kind of combines into like this is a very constructed, effective like hierarchy that we can't ignore, even if we wanted to. If I see someone with a purple name, I can't help but feel like those things happen in my brain, and I immediately place them in that hierarchy, like you said, like there's that legitimacy.
I think the thing, at least for me, like I like seeing new users. Like I'm excited about talking to new users, especially like being able to tell like if there's a lot of older users or something in a room, and you can tell who the new people are and like come up and talk. And Alboy, also, I saw that you were here before. Sorry. Yeah. Here's your.
One final note, real quick. I'm sorry, one moment. Just sorry, real quick.
And then we'll get to,
I would just say that. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
okay.
The both of us kind of have different roles here, though. We're here as us. You know, you're here as you did a 3D scan of yourself, so you have no fear of being in here as yourself. As myself, I'm not afraid of giving away my name. I'm Gur Resnick. Come like me on Facebook. We don't have any anonymity, but for people who do, you start to judge people based off of other things, and you stop looking at them as pure. And this is going to sound terrible. You stop looking at them as humans, and you start looking at them as things to compartmentalize.
I don't think that's what happens. I would push back on that, but I want to hear it out. But I really know what Alboy has to say. But I think that it's a very social. It's tapping into evolved systems that we've had for millions of years that even non-human primates and things like that have as well. So,
all right, please, Alboy.
Yeah, okay. Alboy.
I guess I just wanted to point out the part of the story where VRChat's narrative about all of this is it's not a game, not social hierarchy. It's none of the things you guys were just discussing. All it is a way to figure out how to assess a trust level so that you can prevent hackers and crashers and other ne'er-do-wells who are running around VRChat.
There's a simple way to show that that's not true. You don't have to attach a color to it.
That's true.
You don't have to have a color attached to someone's name to make them trusted or not. Like if it weren't attached to a visual stimulus, then it would just be about safety.
I proposed an alternative system, just to throw this in there, is that I thought color changing name tags would be amazing to match your avatar outfit. If you could just pay $5 a month or something like that and like get access to changing your name tag color. That's what I think would be. It's a fashion idea. The nameplate is a fashion accessory as opposed to.
That's true.
Yeah. But I'll wait. True. Yeah. That's true.
And I guess one final comment about it then. That's how they're presenting it, because it's a way to deal with all the hackers and the bad guys running around. But
there's
I think what you guys are talking about is maybe a little bit of how a lot of this is compulsory, like compulsive. It's compulsive stuff that we do, and we play this game compulsively, even though it was ostensibly set out here in front of us, not as a game. The hierarchy stuff. So, I don't know, it's fascinating.
You and I actually had this discussion earlier about compulsion and fun things like that.
Yes, but it's a social thing. That's I think the key is that it's not just a game because it feels like a core part of who we are and how we interact with the world, which is socialization, which goes beyond games, which is kind of like having fun and doing a hobby. It's social support, and it's like there's something that taps into a deeper part of us. I think when we're in a social environment, and actually, interestingly, Oculus is kind of, I think, more focused on funding social projects. Like their educational department, for example, wants to focus, I think, on social. I don't know this. It's just I got the sense that it seems like social is very important, and so it's just like, why is social so important? It's because it translates something into a deeper.
Well, it's Facebook.
And they're owned by Facebook.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
Well, yeah, that's the big thing too, of course.
Okay, so before we launch into another debate, our time is up. So I want to thank you for coming on the show and having a discussion with us about game and game mechanics and gamification. Really appreciate it.
Do you have any final
final
thoughts or anything to kind of leave?
Reality is a lie. Which it is. I would just say that for those of you who do want to become game designers, and I know there are some of you out here because game design is awesome. I mean, personally, I might just be mirroring it out to all of you, but I'm totally not biased. But for those of you who do want to become game designers, feel free to ping me on Facebook, find me around VRChat, and I'd be happy to talk with you further about it because we definitely don't. We have a lot of game designers in the industry, but we don't have a lot of game designers who understand VR the way you all do. You all live and breathe VR, and that's something a lot of game designers don't have yet. Or it's something future generations are going to have. It's something that you all have now. So I think the more of us there are, the better. I'm not a person who thinks there are slices of a pie or something. There's enough pie to share with everyone. And it's a really good pie, so we should all eat it.
Sweet, I'm all for that. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah,
let's do a photo.
Picture. Let me turn
we're gonna do a final photo. We can't turn off the security right now, so I'll have to do that later. Because it's not the new stage. Remember, I opened the wrong one.
Okay.
It keeps coming back to bite me.
Let's. I didn't know that. Oh wow.
Let's do it over here.
Lobby window.
Are we supposed
The
to
doors inside the
over here or
over here?
Yeah, we could do lobby window.
Which doors?
The lobby. Yeah.
Okay.
You're just like stand behind here.
Momonga, my man.
Yo, what's up with it, bro?
Hello.
Love that guy.
The smaller people have to be up front, actually.
That's true. That's true.
Here, Owlboy, come up front.
Yeah, Owl, yeah, you should go in the front.
Yes, Owlboy.
Wait. Gotta...
Wait, whose camera was it just then?
Yeah, are you really gonna pull that out?
Yeah.
Turn on. Go
guess
to
I better do
none
that
for
too.
trusted. Go to
You wish I was in my particle
none,
avatar.
Yes. Hey guys.
I was like, what?
Oh, dang.
This was right in front of my face back then. I was like, oh, what's that?
I love the old man laugh.
It's Roshi's laugh.
Alrighty, so let's tonight's phrase be it's
Buddy,
not
peace sign.
just a game.
I was gonna say game on.
Or game on.
Oh,
he was gonna say game
on. You can say it's just a game or it's not a game.
for life.
You can say
Yeah,
you can say
VR
it's a
for
game.
life.
Yeah. VR for life.
Sure, why not? Let's do it.
I don't have a VR at all.
I can't
Whatever,
even do that in
one of
mode.
those phrases.
Can I?
I'm gonna take a
Something like
picture
this,
in 3, 2, 1. There we go.
VR for life.
VR for
Yeah,
life.
come on. It is a game.
VR
It's not
for
a
life.
game. Who knows? We're all crazy.
Is that a
Reality
game?
is a lie.
Yes. Reality is
You
a
got
lie.
it?
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, I've got like
Yes.
20 of these right now.
It is such a lie.
Perfect.
Love it.
All right.
Yay, I get to
great.
change my fun avatar. Let's do this.
Yes, I want to see. Oh wait, I have to turn on some.
You ready to do this, Tokyo Goon?
Uh-oh.
Yes,
What's
sir.
happening? Do I have to turn off some safety settings?
He's stuck at
turn
1
them-
or 0.
Yeah!
Let's see. Okay.
That was the yes. I love it. Okay.
Why is he not loading for me?
Yeah, nothing. I don't see anything.
Safety settings on? Yeah, I have it
I
set to 9
turned
right
mine
now.
off.
Go to
Oh,
his
literally
avatar,
have it set to
click
9.
on him, and
Oh,
just
there
hit
it
show
is.
Go
avatar.
through all my stuff. Let's see.
I did. Oh, now it's loading. It'll take a second.
Okay.
It's loading
Show
everyone
avatar.
over again. Yay!
Yeah, great.
Wow.
This is probably copyrighted, so I'll go ahead and end the stream here.
Okay, thanks, Ghoster.
I have no clue what's happening right now because he's loading.
It's yeah, everyone's loading for me.